Well, morning all, welcome to the Old Classic Car channel. Now, if you've been following things for a little while, you'll know that of late my main attentions on the Dodge pickup have been under the bonnet. We had a failure to proceed, and that was followed by quite a lot of investigative work under the bonnet just to try and figure out why the engine wouldn't run, and then also why the oil pressure suddenly disappeared. Now, I'm hoping that those little issues are behind me now, so I can turn my attentions more to sort of the body, the cosmetics, and just helping preserve things a little bit. Plus, it'll also make it just look a little bit more cared for, especially as we've got a prom run coming up in the very, very near future. So to that end, I'm going to talk a little bit about this stuff. This is boiled linseed oil, and this stuff I find very, very useful when it comes to preserving and just sort of improving slightly the look of aged paintwork. Now, a couple of years ago I did the same with Big Dodge over there, and you can see this stuff goes a long way. That is the same tin that I used on that, so you only have to use a very small amount, but it has the benefit of just providing a bit of a coating on the paintwork, especially on an old truck like this, and it just helps preserve it if it gets damp or if it rains on it, that kind of thing. So yesterday evening I made a start on oily ragging the Dodge, and I thought, well, before I finish it off today, I'll just have a quick walk around and you can see like a bit of a before and after, the bits that I have done and the bits that I haven't yet done, and hopefully you'll see where I'm coming from, where I think it just overall, it just lifts the appearance slightly without looking too shiny, because we don't want things looking too shiny when you're doing an oily ragger. I can hear a helicopter coming, so I'll wrap this up and let's just go and have a quick walk around the truck, and we'll just see the bits that I've already done and the bits that I'm going to do a little bit later today. Now, I must confess I did cheat a little bit when I started doing this yesterday evening. I started on the nose cone and I actually broke out this. I thought I'd give this a bit of a try. 3-in-1 Easy Wax. Now, this came from the batch of polishes and other products that I found that date to 1952. I memean, who knew that 3-in-1 ever did car polish? I certainly didn't. This has actually got like a mild abrasive built into it as well, and it did actually work really well. So I tried that just on the nose cone, and it actually came out looking pretty smart, but I thought, no, I'm going to go with what I know and stick to the oily ragging. So I then oily ragged that and then carried on doing the rest of it. So I've done the bonnet and the wing on this side, around the windscreen, the door, and down the side here with the boiled linseed oil. You can see, hopefully, it just gives it that little bit of a sheen. I also did the tailgate as well. But this side I haven't done yet. You can probably see, hopefully, that it's a little bit duller. If we look on the back of the cab, there's a real before and after. The right hand side I did yesterday evening. The left hand side I will do later this morning. But you can really see it just gives the colour a little bit of added depth. Just pop that there, and it's just really nice. And like I say, you put it on super thin, you only need a tiny little bit on a rag and you can just wipe it for miles. It's still slightly oily at the moment, but it does eventually dry off. Your regular linseed oil, I don't think that would ever dry off, but the boiled linseed oil, it will actually dry off. So it's really important, if you're going to give this a go, to use the boiled stuff. But yeah, I think it just lifts it a little bit. Obviously, like I say, we don't want it super shiny because it's just an old truck with very old paint. This side I haven't done yet. And the paint is quite sort of bloomy. You can rub it with your fingers and it actually shines up a little bit. Which looks great, don't get me wrong, but I think the idea is just to sort of give it a bit of extra protection. I mean, you can see I've done the bonnet side panel there, but I haven't done this yet. Hopefully the camera's picking that up. But yeah, it does really make a difference. And the beauty of it is, where you've got seams like this, you can puddle it up or get a bit on a brush, that's what I tend to do, and just slop some down into these little crevices. And it'll just give it a bit of added protection if you find yourself caught out with a bit of rain, maybe at a show or something like that. So yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with polish if you've got an immaculate paint finish, but for this sort of job I think oily ragging is the way to go. Now, we are promised rain a little bit later on this morning, which is always very, very unwelcome. So I think what I'll do is I'll turn the truck round and then it'll be ready to put it straight back in the garage if the wet stuff does decide to appear a little bit later this morning. And that means at least I can get to the side that still needs oily ragging if I do have to put it back in the garage. Right. Now, if you've been watching previous uploads, you'll know that the starting on this old girl was becoming a little bit problematic. Just give it a little bit of choke. Touch wood, things are definitely looking up on that score. My youthful assistant would normally be doing this for me, but he's inside revising at the moment for his GCSEs, so it's left to me. Of course, it's a 3-speed gearbox, so first is down where you'd normally find second on a normal vehicle. That'll do. Right, so I think we will start on this back corner. Like I said, I did the tailgate yesterday and down that side. So this is the side that needs doing today. And this is the fiddliest bit really, the side panels. It's a step side body. So the body is sort of set in a little bit and the wings flare out. So all these little seams here. If I get my little brush, you'll see. This is the brush I use, and this is really handy for just poking in the oil into these little crevices and seams and up in little edges, and yeah, just in all the little fiddly bits that you couldn't get a rag. That's one of the grease nipples there for the rear suspension. But yeah, get it in all the little nooks and crannies and you can't go too far wrong. I think this was probably last done about 10 years ago, something like that. Previous owners I know did it at least once. You do have to keep reapplying it every now and again, but it's the same with polish. But yeah, that side has been done, and it really just lifts it without being too in your face. I also use the brush for getting inside here in the side hinges, reflections, and the side hinges here on the side of the bonnet, round the badges, all these kind of little corners round here, next to these little sort of marker lights on the scuttle. So yeah, a brush comes in very handy. And the beauty of it is you can just add to it whenever you want, so you don't need to worry about it too much. Which is why I like oldie worldy paint finishes like this rather than something that's super immaculate, because you can just chuck a bit of oil on and not really worry about it too much. But anyway, like I say, we've only got a brief window in the weather this morning, so let's crack on. This is quite a cool old thing. This is off an old fairground ride, presumably from the 1930s. Now, before I get on with that, I just wanted to point one little safety tip out when it comes to oily ragging with boiled linseed oil. Now, I have read of people having problems where these things, if you get loads of oily rags together and just stash them all together and chuck them in the corner of the garage, apparently they can begin to smoulder, and it has been known that they can actually ignite over time. They get hotter and hotter and they can actually ignite. If you do a bit of a search on Google, you'll find more details out about this, so I'm not really going to go into the details and the whys and wherefores of how this happens and why it happens, but I'm just pointing it out. And I recommend, if you are going to try doing a bit of oily ragging with a boiled linseed oil, just take care with the rags where you leave them. Don't leave them in a mound somewhere. I tend to leave them outside when I've finished and just let them air, and just sort of any vapours and whatnot will just sort of clear themselves away. But just bear that in mind if you're going to give this a go. And the other thing I would also point out is, if you're going to try this and you haven't done it before, just try it on a concealed part of the car, just to make sure that there's not going to be any adverse effects. There shouldn't be. I mean, I've never heard of any, but just to point it out, just to be on the safe side really, because you don't want to do anything that will actually damage the paintwork. This is all about putting a protective coating on the paintwork, but just try the area out of sight first would be my recommendation. Like I say, this stuff goes a really long way. You don't need much at all, just a little bit on a rag and wipe it around and it goes a really long way. Just get around all these little corners. You find the build up on the rag itself means you can just go further and further every time you add a drop onto the rag. The thinner you put it on, the quicker it'll dry. Like I say, it may take a few days to dry when it's nice warm weather, and you can always wipe it off a bit. You can always sort of rub it down a bit just to thin the layer if it's not drying as quickly as you need. So it's really just a case of experimenting and seeing how you get on with it. But yeah, it's quite a satisfying job in many ways. You're just protecting the original finish. I know there are other finishes that hot rodders use. Is it anchor wax? I think that's a name I've heard of. So there's many different ways of doing it, but this is just a way I quite like. Plus it smells quite nice as well. Just protect these old tail lights as well. Old American, I think they're signal stats rear lamps. So I'm going to crack on with that, and then I'll show you the results after I've finished the rear side of the bodywork, I think. There's my little brush. There we go. Brush. The little corners and the folds in the metal. And here. All very satisfying. Quite satisfying really. It's like if you've got an old leather interior, you feed the leather. And this is, well, basically you're feeding the paint. It gives you a chance to clean off some marks if there are any. And it's very satisfying to know that you are applying an oily substance to places where it'll do a lot of good, i.e. in all these little seams like here. Basically anywhere that water can run to, you pop a bit of this in there and you find the water just runs off once it's dried a little bit. So it's not the sort of thing you might do on a Concours E-type Jaguar perhaps. But if you're oily ragging an old Mark II, then there are definitely worse things you could do to help preserve it and give it the oily rag treatment. And it has the added benefit of just lifting it up, just sprucing it up a little bit, making it look a little bit more cared for. So that's not necessarily a bad thing either. If you're a fan of the oily rag, let me know in the comments what you do to oily rag your particular car or truck or whatever you have tucked away at home. It's always interesting to know what other people are up to. Get some tips from other people, that's always very useful. And that's one of the great things about the comments section, because you get lots and lots of feedback on this kind of thing. And you never stop getting new ideas when it comes to looking after these old jalopies. There we go. I say, this goes a very, very long way. Once the rag is a bit oily, it's just elbow grease really thereafter. It smells nice as well afterwards. Okay, well that's that corner done. Now we'll move over and finish off the back of the cab. Good, that's better. Well, that's all that side done now, so that can start drying. Like I say, it can even take a few days if the weather's not particularly warm, but it does dry off after a little while. But yeah, the key to this really is putting it on very, very thin. You can always wipe it off a bit afterwards if it's not drying as quickly as you want. But yeah, you just have to work with it a little bit. So there we go, that's all done, ready for the next, well that'll probably last a couple of years or so, and then I'll think about doing it again. So the excess on the rag I just wiped over the running boards, don't want those to be too oily. But yeah, bound to have missed something out somewhere, but I think that's most of it done. It's just a nice feeling thinking you've given it a bit of a protective, oily surface. And it does dry off a little bit after a few days, so that's alright, but it's not, it's just ever so slightly sticky. It's certainly not gloopy, but this is why you put it on really, really, just missed a bit there, that's why you put it on really, really thin, so it gives it a chance just to dry off a little bit. There we go. I probably will oil up the wood in the back as well, because obviously you don't want that getting sodden. Yeah, I think that was what was that, a couple of hours, something like that. So I think that was definitely worthwhile. And the more often you do it, the more protection you get. So that's a very, very useful evening and morning spent here at OCC HQ, and the Dodge is looking all the better for it, I think. So we'll just keep an eye on the weather, leave it outside as long as we can, because that just aids the drying process, especially if the sun pays us a visit today. That'll be especially welcome, but as long as it's dry I think we'll be alright for now. Yeah, that's looking pretty smart now. Certainly the tidiest I've ever had it looking. If you're also an exponent of the oily rag approach, let me know in the comments. What do you do? Do you mix up a special brew? I know some people with old lorries wipe them over with diesel once a year just to keep the rust at bay and keep them looking just a little bit nicer. Obviously you can use something like WD-40. I often use that on the wheels if I just want to spruce the wheels or the hubcaps up. I just spray a bit of WD-40 on there, so that really helps. So let me know in the comments what your favourite brews, your favourite magic potions are when it comes to the oily rag. Or do not like the oily rag idea at all. Like I say, I think it's just really handy because you can really work it into these sort of seams, so where water might get to, if you're unlucky enough to be caught out in a shower, you can really work it and gloop it into these little edges, and I think that is good, and that's something that you can't really do with polish. Maybe I'll do the floor sometime as well, but yeah, it doesn't get wet very often, so I don't think that's going to suffer anytime soon, but yeah, I'll probably do that sometime. Yeah. What a great little truck. And here's another product from that batch of 1952 goodies, and again another one I've never heard of before. Simonize polishing powder. Even on the tin it's not really clear It just says apply Simonize in the normal way and with a dry cloth dip a fresh dry cloth in the powder and rub finish gently. So I'm not sure if you're meant to use this in conjunction with regular Simonize wax, or you do this before or you do it after. I'm not quite sure, but certainly one I've never heard of before.